All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Craig, or Crafty, from Craftworks Distillery, and this is our little series called Australian Craft Distillers Shooting the Shit. Basically, those who don't know about it, what we're doing is we're having conversations with distillers and people that help us pull our spirits together and put it into bottles. So it's a very open, frank conversation. We have a bit of fun on the way, and we hope you enjoy it. So we've interviewed Australian distillers. We've interviewed master coopers. And tonight we've got a very, very exciting person that we're going to have a wee chat to, just a wee chat. And this would be Mr. Ned Gahan from Waterford Distillery. Waterford Distillery in Ireland. Oh, I went Ireland instead of Ireland. Sorry about that. Couldn't help myself. Anyway, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce who's on the screen tonight. So in the bottom left, we have Todd, my right-hand man at Craftworks Distillery. On the, that was the left. On the right is Luke, local nerd, whiskey lover, and IT support and holding this whole thing together. And without further ado, the man of the night that we're going to have some fun with tonight and ask some really good questions, Ned from Waterford. How are you, mate?
Good, Crafty, and yourself? Sláinte from Waterford in Ireland, or as you say, Ireland. Ireland. And yeah, so it's 7 o'clock with you in the evening, and it's 8 o'clock here in the morning. So yeah, we'll shoot some shit and we'll have a few drinks and we'll have a bit of crack. So thanks for having me on anyway. I'm delighted to be having a chat with you at the other side of the world there.
Mate, it's awesome to have you on, and yeah, I mean, it's a good way to start the day for you, and it's a good way for us to finish the night. So yeah, let's rip into it. So first things first, I have a sample of Waterford. I have a sample of two Waterfords, actually. I have Bannow Island, and is it Ballycavan?
Ballycavan.
I've got that one as well. So I've just poured Bannow Island 1.1, and you were saying a second ago that's what you've got in the glass as well.
Yeah, so I have Bannow 1.1 as well, if people can see that. So
wow.
Yeah, you sent a care package of your own stuff over, but I didn't get it yet. So
no.
I said it'd be rude to have you drinking on your own. So I said I better pour something. So yeah, so we both have Bannow 1.1. So
awesome. Well, as I said, I just poured this. I haven't actually tasted it yet, but man, I'm loving the legs. I'm loving the legs and I'm loving the nose. I really am.
So I suppose just on the oils, on what we tend to have is we have really good oils on our new make spirit and our whiskey. And what I would usually say is the legs are like mine, slow and thick. So that's I think that's a good analogy for all the oils that we have on the legs. But yeah, really good oils, really good legs. Yeah, and this I suppose was one of the first two releases that came out. So this is 3 years, 7 months, and 10 or 11 days old. So yeah, really good nose on it.
It's what's the ABV? 50%?
50%, yeah. All our whiskies are 50%, non-chill filtered, and no colouring, so natural whiskey.
Right, excellent. All right, well let's start at the beginning. Why I'm enjoying this and why you're enjoying yours. So as I mentioned the other day, I have a real soft spot for Bruichladdich. Bruichladdich was the ignition of my passion, and it's the reason I do what I do now. It just excited me, and it started with someone at a masterclass telling the whole story of Bruichladdich, and this is in the days of Mark Rainier and Jim McEwen, and now of course Mark's moved on and created the Waterford experience. So take us right back to the start, if you could, and just how did it come about? How did Mark turn up in Waterford and went, this is a damn good spot to open up a distillery, and then engage with the local community? How did it all start? I'd be very intrigued to hear that.
Yeah, I suppose we go back to that. So I suppose it started, and when you're talking about Mark and you're talking about Waterford, you start with Bruichladdich, and previous to that was wine. So Mark has been 20 years in the wine industry and then 20 years in the whiskey industry. So when Mark was in Bruichladdich, he revived it, I suppose. He tells the story of going to Bruichladdich and on a bike with his brother on a golfing holiday to have a look at the distillery, because when he was in the wine world, he came across Bruichladdich, and it was the first whiskey that he kind of really felt he had a connection with, I suppose. But when he got to Bruichladdich, it was closed, and on the sign there was plant closed was on it. But there was someone walking around, and Mark said, "Hello, I'm a big fan. Would it be possible to come in and have a look around?" And there was someone there, and told him to fuck off, like. So I think that kind of was Mark's first experience of Bruichladdich, but resolved to buy Bruichladdich. So went to buy it. It took him a good few years to buy it. Eventually did buy it and got it up and running. And I suppose, you know, people are familiar with Bruichladdich then and where it went and what it had become. But in 2013, then I think, the laddie there. In 2013, then Remy came knocking to buy, and I suppose, cut a long story short, Mark didn't want to buy it or didn't want to sell it, but the rest of the board did, so it was sold. Mark felt, I suppose, that his terroir approach and stuff was only kind of getting going, because it was a slow burner in Bruichladdich to get people on board and get people to buy in and that. So he left, and I suppose he felt he still had unfinished business. So he remembered a conversation that himself and Duncan McIlvery, who was his chief engineer, Bruichladdich had, who sadly passed away this year. And Duncan said to him that the best barley he ever saw came from the southeast of Ireland. It actually came from the port of Waterford, so it would have left the port of Waterford. So that stuck with Mark. So he just said, listen, Ireland is a common market. There's, you know, saturation of distilleries in Scotland. There's growth potential in Ireland. So he came over to Ireland, and the distillery that's here was previously a brewery, built originally in 1792. And the first documented of the brewery was the 14th of February, so Valentine's Day 1792. Diageo or Guinness bought it then around 1956, and proceeded to do what Diageo does, spend money and then close it. So it was a traditional brewery. We were making an ale called Smithwick's and made a lager called Hoffman's. And then in 2004, spent 40 million euros upgrading it from a traditional brewery to what was called a beer blending agent plant, or BBA, where we made Guinness concentrate for about 40 different markets. Actually, Australia was one of the markets. Are you familiar with GFE?
I'm not, no.
No. So it's more like Nigeria actually would have been the second biggest market for Guinness in the world at the time. So a plant in Dublin in St. James's Gate would have supplied that. So it's basically a concentrate Guinness. You send it off to the different markets, and they do a base beer, and you add this, and you get this concentrate Guinness, you get this GFE. So it's actually about 8% alcohol. And if anyone is familiar with a bottle of Guinness, if you've been to Ireland, or if any of the Irish people are out there, it's a bit more like that than the pint of Guinness. But anyway, they spent 40 million, and 10 years later decided to shut us down due to the downturn in the economy, and obviously in sales of beer. So they closed ourselves, Kilkenny Brewery and Dundalk Brewery and consolidated all to Dublin. And I suppose 2 of the 3 sites are now distilleries, ourselves and Dundalk, John Teeling being in Dundalk. So Mark came over, happened that there was a state-of-the-art plant here as it was. So he came over, southeast of Ireland, found somewhere that he could make whiskey with a small investment in engineering and got it for the right money. So everything just started just aligned for him, I suppose. Came over and he bought it. So he bought it in 2015. So he spent around 7 million euros, I think, at the time. And
wow.
if you were to cost out all the plant and everything, it would probably be that and a bit more anyway. So he got it for good money.
Yeah.
When he was buying Bruichladdich, it took him nearly a year to get 30 investors. And he tells the story, it was literally the last 10 seconds or 15 seconds and for the deal falling through, and he actually bought it. So this time around, I think it took him 11 hours to get 60 investors. For 30, so the money came in. So I suppose we started on a good financial note. We had really good investors. So that meant that we didn't need to sell gin. We didn't need to sell bottles or casks. So every bit of stock that we were laying down was going to turn into whiskey, and we could spend 6 years with no income. So what happened then? Mark was looking at what's the concept, what's he looking at, and it's terroir. I suppose we're known for terroir, but for us it's the umbrella term of provenance. And provenance for us is terroir, traceability, and transparency. Okay.
Gotcha.
So single farms. So he wanted to get a single farm to be brewed and distilled and cast and bottled separately. So how do you go about that? So he bought the brewery here in 2015. Then we started converting it to a distillery. And actually, yesterday, 2015, 5 years ago was our first run of distills. So we're 5 years and a day running distills, I suppose.
Wow! Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was a big deal at the time. I suppose we were less than a year turning from a brewery to a distillery. So Mark met with some maltsters and explained what he was looking for and explained what he'd need and his vision. And so we partnered with Minch Malt, who are known also as Boer Malt internationally, and they have a plant in Athy. So they have the contact with the farmers. We don't have contracts with farmers. I suppose some people think that we have contracts with farmers, and we don't. It's with Minch Malt, and they have the contracts. But we do have a good working relationship with farmers.
Yep.
And so basically, what are we looking for? We're looking for roughly around 100 to 120 tons of barley to be supplied and kept separate. So the next meeting Mark had, I think, was with Dalton's in Kilkenny. And Dalton's in Kilkenny are a merchant, grain merchant. So they bring in the grain and they look after it. And they had been used to bringing in, lorry loads of grain, thousands of tons, drying it and storing it. But Mark wanted the farms to be stored individually. So the first challenge was to build something where grain can be kept separate. So they met Mark, I think, and shook hands in May 2015, and they asked him, so when do you want this done? And he said, well, for the harvest this year, which was August. So they just kicked into gear, and I suppose this whole project doesn't work without Dalton's doing that and having that. So they built what we call the cathedral, which was a big shed with individual concrete bays that can hold each farm separately. So when I mentioned terroir and traceability and transparency, I suppose this is where the traceability comes into effect a bit, in that normally a farmer will bring the grain to the merchant and dump it there, but to ensure traceability, Dalton's will go out and collect the grain. So each load is traced from the farm into Dalton's. So that's, say, 3 or 4 lorry loads then is left in the ground, and then that's dried separately. So we have a dryer that's separate to all the other grains to dry that, and that comes in, I suppose, about 18% moisture. We dry it down, our Dalton's dry down to about 14% moisture, and so if 120 tons comes in, we'll get about maybe over 100 tons of dry grain stored.
Right.
Okay, so that's so I suppose when Mark came, it was really an aligning of the stars. Everything just clicked into place for him. Same with people here. He never actually advertised for anyone. It was people who he met, or just a happenstance, you know, or I know this person, they could be good, and you get a job. So it was just, I suppose at the moment, there's probably about 8 or 10 people working here who had worked here previously. So that was a help, I suppose. When we started initially, there was a few of us who had worked here previously, so that kind of helped get things up and running as well. So definitely an aligning of the stars. And also when Mark came, none of us knew what Tower was about. None of us had a clue, but there was absolutely no resistance to it. Whereas in Brookladdy, it took them probably a long time to get people in on the idea, because they are, I suppose, whiskey, they're used to whiskey. They've been involved in whiskey all their life, and you know, it's going back to what people say, like, you know, 80% of whiskey's flavors come from the barrel, and we'd say kind of that's a bit of bullshit, really. But anyway, we'll talk about that after, like, you know. But yeah, so there was no pushback. I think he was very surprised at that. So we just hit the ground running, and I think that was a big help as well in the first few years.
And what about from yourself, from your own personal story? Because you were working at the brewery, was that correct? And the brewery closed down. Yeah. So when it was the opportunity of Waterford, how did you make the transition from brewer to distillery? And just to add to that, I have a huge amount of respect personally for the brewing aspect of distilling. And I think if you've got fundamental brewing excellence, that will carry through into distillation, making great whiskey. So yeah, how did you make the transition?
Yeah, I suppose it was so I worked in the brewery for 15 years. And when the brewery closed, then I decided to take a year off. The kids were small. I said I'd take a year off and see how that goes and stuff. The eldest was starting school, so that's, to date, I'd say that's been the toughest job I've ever done. So at the end of that, then I said, well, when I was starting off, I said I'd take a year out, and at the end of it, I'd go back at the job. So I had met Mark during the year, as it happened. There was a guy here who was kind of caretaker, and Mark had come in to have a look around. So I got a call from Eugene to say, listen, there's a guy here and he's asking some questions about process and all the bits and pieces, and he wasn't sure. So he said, if you're around, could you come down? So I said, yeah. So I came down and it got bad information, I suppose, starting off. And he said, there's an English fella and 2 Scottish fellas there, he said. And the 2 Scottish lads are buying the distillery. I don't know who the English lad is. Okay. So I went into the office, and the 2 Scottish guys sat at one side of the table, and the English lad, as it was, sat at the end of the table. So I faced the 2 Scottish lads and talked away to him. But Mark was obviously what Eugene described as Englishman, even though I think he's maybe Scottish, I don't know. And the Scottish guys were Richard Forsyth, who owns Forsyth's, and he was a good friend of Mark's, and one of the engineers from Forsyth. So they were coming over to have a look around, so asking questions and chatting away and the whole lot. And then we went out for a walk around and showed them around and that. And then that was over, and we were coming back in, and Mark shook my hand and said, thanks very much, and blah blah. So that was the first meeting. Didn't know who he was, didn't know anything about him. I said to Eugene then, I said, who was that fella? He said, I don't know. So it turned out it was Mark was buying it anyway. So a couple of months later, after he bought it, I sent him a message on LinkedIn, And then Paul started here, was the site manager. I got to come in, but I had secured a job in the meantime, I suppose. And I was due to start on a Monday, and I came in and Mark on a Thursday. And like anyone who knows Mark knows, you don't tend to talk much. He talks, and I was a bit shell shocked because coming from a Diageo background and after doing a lot of work on how to do interviews and stuff, this was nothing like had happened before.
Right.
So eventually, when I did get to say a few bits and pieces, I was saying to him, listen, I work for Diageo and this and that, and I said I haven't, I kind of go on my gut on stuff, on bits and pieces, that's the way I kind of intuition, I suppose. I just said I go on my gut, and Mark said to me, "Oh yes," he said, "and what a substantial gut you've got." So when you hear that in an interview, so you don't know what the fuck's going on. You're scratching your head and you're kind of going, Jesus, do I hit this fella or what? So that kind of laid down that like. So I came out and I said to myself, that was a waste of time, not good. But just when I was leaving, he said, "What are you actually looking for?" He said, "I don't have a job." I said, "Well, tell me if you have a job. If you have a job in a few months, keep me in mind, or does not happen at all." So he said, "Off you go," and I think about it. So I got a call a couple of hours later to say, "Listen, can you start?" So I said, "Yeah." So there was no discussion about money or jobs or anything. So I had to ring the other company I'd got a job for in total, and they were very good. So I came in, and basically when I started, it was literally stripping back the plant and helping Anthony and Paul get the place up and running from an engineering point of view. So I was a mulligan, I suppose. So after a couple of months, Mark said to me, listen, he said, "Would you like to be head distiller?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So I suppose it was a bit of a punt because Mark had envisaged, say, a chief engineer, a site manager, a head brewer, and a head distiller. Right. So at the time, Lisa Ryan was here. She was the head brewer, and I think the plan was to bring someone in from Scotland to do the distilling. And Mark did say, "Listen," he said, "I'm taking a punt on this." He said, "This is, obviously the board or whatever maybe wanted a head distiller to come in from Scotland with experience." But I think what I kind of figured out afterwards was, I think Mark wanted virgin eyes or fresh eyes at it, not to be clouded by previous experiences or what people thought of whiskey, was to come at it with fresh eyes. And what he wanted to was someone who could actually distill. So I had the brewing and distilling. Like if someone was off sick, Neil, who's the head brewer now, can run the show, or I can run the show. And I think that's what he wanted. He wants someone who would be first and foremost able to do distilling and brewing and understand all that. So that was, I suppose, that was kind of maybe 6 months into 2015. So that was my first introduction to distilling. So it's been a learning curve every day since. So that was a bit of an eye opener, and yeah, it's going okay.
It's great. It going back to what you were saying about terroir, which I'm going to come at a different perspective. So there's schools of thought. This is how I perceive it. There's schools of thought of terroir and grain does actually impact flavour. And the other school of thought is the further you go down the manufacturing process of whiskey, the less impact it has on the overall flavour profile. So grain has no impact at all. What you're doing is you're proving that grain does contribute to flavour substantially, and you're proving terroir is a real thing. It's not a marketing spin thing. There must have been a wall of resistance from traditional distilleries, industrial distilleries that didn't subscribe to terroir. and subscribe to the fact that the barrel is king, and it's all to do with the barrel, and barley is really just contribution of alcohol and nothing else. How have you managed to get your message across and push through that wall of opposition? Because you obviously have done that. On a world scale, people talk about Waterford and what Waterford is doing. So how has that been done?
Yeah, I suppose baby steps, I suppose, is probably the starting point. And I suppose, to be honest, Crafty, a lot of people are still doubtful about terroir. I suppose I'm in the fortunate position, or the people in the distillery are in the fortunate position, that we get to taste a new make every day, and we can see the difference in farm to farm to farm. And there's still a lot of people out there who say that the distillation process is a destructive part of the process.
Yeah.
And I'm not a scientist. I'm not into science. I don't know, the whole scientific background of it. But what I can tell you is that, I've tasted the difference from each farm. At the start, we tried to do everything as repeatable as possible, so that the difference was the barley. We've slightly changed now a little bit, that we're working with what the farm is telling us. So with fermentation times, with distillation cut points and bits and pieces, so a little bit more variable in it. But at the very start, it was trying to keep everything as repeatable as possible. And we were able to do that to a large extent due to what Diageo left here with their we have thermoregulated washbacks, we have pressure transmitters, temperature transmitters, everything is captured. Our brew house is state of the art. We have a mash filter, and we have a hydro mill, which is very unusual. But the mash filter is like, I suppose Mark calls it the terroir extractor. Okay,
right.
So I suppose, when we're looking at terroir and people's opposition to it, Mark has always said we're going to get knocked, and terroir is going to be taken and used in the wrong context from our point of view. So with that in mind, Mark looked at doing a terroir project. Okay, so we're just over 3 years into that now, and basically what it is to scientifically prove that terroir exists in malt and barley for Irish malt and barley for whiskey. Okay, so there was a guy called Dr. Dustin Howard in Oregon State University, who Mark had read some findings on, and he had done something similar in craft beer in Oregon, in America. So he made contact with him and asked him would he be interested. So that kind of got the ball rolling. Neil Conway, the head brewer, then has kind of run with it since that, I suppose. So what we're looking at is so Dr. Dustin Howard, Oregon State University, Teagasc, who are Department of Agriculture, are involved. We have Tackler and Thompson, who are in Scotland, who do independent analysis and stuff. So we have Minch Malt, obviously, who are the maltsters. So we have 2 sites, one in Athy in the Midlands of Ireland, and one in Bunclody, which is in the southeast, which is in Wexford. We have 2 sites there, and we have 2 crop varieties that are grown there. And then they're micro brewed and fermented and distilled. And the findings then go to ourselves, or the spirit goes to ourselves, Minch Malt, ourselves, Dustin and Tacklock and Thompson and Teagasc. Okay, so Teagasc did a full chemical analysis of the spirit. Okay, so gas chromatography, full on science, the whole lot. We had a tasting panel, and we did the tastings on it and scored it, and we sent off the findings then to Dustin, who breaks it down, and he also does his work in Oregon. So at the end of it, we're going to have a peer review paper. So that's the important thing. As much as we want to say to Dustin, listen, say this or show that, and the same to Teagasc, they can't, because it's a peer review paper that Dustin is going to give. We were hoping to have it during the year, but obviously COVID messed that up. So it's a peer review paper to say terroir exists, and these are the reasons why terroir exists. So I suppose that's the big thing. Mark wants a piece of paper to wave at people and show From another point of view, I suppose some people are not interested in terroir. Some people just like the taste of whiskey, or like the provenance, or like, you know, the fact that we can trace a whiskey back to a field and the date was sown and everything along. And other people don't give a flying feck, like they just like the taste of the whiskey.
Yep.
So there's every kind of person out there, but I suppose there will be always doubters. For me, in when I'm distilling, I would hate to think that I was destroying something. The way I look at it is, it's like a chef. It's like a chef that is making a sauce, and what you do with a sauce, you start and you reduce it down to concentrate the flavors up, and that's the way I look at distilling. For me, is I'm concentrating the flavors up. And also people will say, well, each distillery is different in the whole lot. That's 100%. And cut points have an impact, and flow rates have an impact in the whole lot. The stills have an impact, and that. But what I would say is, we at Waterford have a distillery style spirit. And the spirit we're looking to make is, like myself, light and elegant and fruity, okay? That's what we're looking to do, a light, elegant, fruity, floral spirit.
Yeah, right.
And the flavors then come from the barley. The other flavors come from the barley. So when I'm saying a light, elegant, fruity, floral spirit, how do I do that? By having a really low and slow distillation. So that's what we say here, low and slow. There's no panic, we're not in any rush. So we have really slow boils. Our heads is probably 30 minutes or a little bit more. It's done on nose and taste. It's not done by a machine. Okay. When we do get onto spirit, then we have a really tight middle cut, but the flow on spirit on our spirit is really slow. We don't go over 500 liters an hour, which is extremely slow, because if you imagine we're boiling something, and by having less steam, you have a less flow rate, but also you have the lighter vapors will get turned back to spirit. The heavier vapors will go up so far and come back down. So if I was to put steam on, a higher steam rate on, I would get heavier vapors over. But to me, that's a distillery style rather than flavor. Our cut point then is fairly high. We'll cut at about 65.5 to 66. You could go down to 62 or 63 if you wanted.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a really heavy, dour, papery, fainty spirit. But that's the spirit, that's the style of spirit rather than the flavor, if you get me.
Totally. The style of spirit. You know, to give you some idea, so my mash bill is based on a stout beer. I started with a stout beer, broke it back to just barley, and I embarked on a 2-year experiment using base malts, roasted malts, specialty malts, and at the end of the 2 years, convinced myself and Todd, my good mate, that yes, the flavors of barley do come through in distillation, and that's roasted in that. And so we've got a unique style of whiskey we're making. And in Australia, there's a lot of distilleries that are pushing the envelope and going different ways and making different distillates and making different whiskies. And it's not just Australia, it's global. And I think that's one of the most exciting things that's going on right now is people pushing the envelope, trying different things and developing their own styles and taking it different ways. Hey, just to change the subject though, I want to go to barrels, talk about barrels. Because we hear the traditional marketing thing is barrels account for 65-70% of flavor in a final product. I'm leaning more to like 60%, 55% based on what I'm experiencing. And I know with Waterford, you've got a really interesting wood policy. You're using first fill American, you're using virgin oak, you're using fortifieds, and using French oak. Is it a standard approach, the ratios that you're applying there, or you're playing around with the barrel ratios?
So I suppose, the casks, and I suppose the 80% and that. And you'll be surprised when I say this one. we reckon that 100%, I'm going to say this maybe a couple of times. We reckon 100% of a spirit's time is influenced by its time in wood.
All right, and I'll pause and I'll think about that. Yeah, carry on.
So what do I mean by that? So a cask influences the spirit, okay? Yes. But you mentioned first fill. So we're using first fill, okay? But like, what happens if it's a second, third, or fourth, fifth, a recharred cask that's maybe recharred, and that's the third or fourth fill after that? That's, I'm going to say shit wood. It is shit wood. It's going to give you nothing.
Yeah, much lighter influence from the actual barrel. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah,
it's going to give you nothing, like. So right. Does flavour come from that? You know, if you have a whiskey that's because I've heard stories of someone getting been offered barrels that are 6th or 7th fill. You know, like what the fuck's that going to do for you?
We cut those in half and sell them at hardware shops.
You know what I mean? You know, that's going to fulfill legislation, like. So what I would say is that your spirit is influenced by 100% of the cask.
Yeah, I get you now. I totally get you.
Okay, yes. You get me now?
Yeah.
So the other thing I can't abide either is when people say, or when you go on a distillery tour and you see a thing with this is the colour after 1 year, and this is the colour after 5, and this is the colour after 10, and this is the colour after 20, and it's bullshit.
Yeah. Depends on the wood.
Yeah, well, it depends on the wood, but if you have a cask in a first fill cask, American cask, it's going to get a colour. Whiskey, you get its colour in its first 6 to 12 months, and it's not going to change much after that. We have virgin American oak casks there. I should have a sample, I don't. We have a virgin American oak cask there that's been filled for 3 years, and sometimes it's not darker than some of the whiskies that are out there. That has been in a first fill cask. So what's influencing that? Caramel, E150 is influencing that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Yeah. So what I would say is the initial question you asked, Crafty, was the wood policy. Okay, so I got kind of sidetracked a little bit there. So when we started, we had the farm was split into 50%. A farm which would be roughly around 200 casks. Okay, is 50% American first fill. So we get our casks from Kelvin and Speyside in America, and they're only first fill casks, and they're non-rinse casks because rinsing is becoming an issue now as well, because I'm not sure if you're familiar with rinsing.
No, I'm not. Please elaborate.
So rinsing is a thing in America where they dump a cask and they'll put water into the cask after.
Right.
Okay. And the water will extract the alcohol that has gone into the wood. And you get maybe a couple of percent ABV out of it, but they're extracting that, they're not leaving it in the cask. And that's what rinsing is. So it's not just rinsing out the cask, it's actually leaving water in there to extract the alcohol, the last bit of alcohol out of the wood. And they can do it with the temperatures in America and stuff. So that's a rinse cask. So you might pay a little bit less for that, but you know, there's some of the properties from that cask is gone. So ours are just first fill casks, non-rinsed. So 50% of the farm is that. 20% of the farm is American virgin oak from Speyside and Kelvin again. 15% of the farm will go into French premium casks. So when I'm talking about the French casks or red wine casks, Mark, as I said earlier on, had 20 years experience in the wine industry, has a lot of contacts in the wine world and knows his wine. So we have casks like Margaux, Chateau Lafite, Mouton Rothschild, those kind of premium casks. But we also have other casks as well from different chateaus, like we have Lynch Bage, we have Chateau Violet, just other chateaus as well. And the other 15% is from sweet fortified wines. We call them VDN. Maybe not VDN in the strictest terms, but sweet fortified wines like sherry, port, Madeira, Masala. And we're not, and when I say sherry and we're not talking about seasoned casks again, like, you know, you put some sherry in it and swill it around. These are the older type, these are the old casks.
And these are recouped and recharred, or
no.
You're going in wet wood or
yeah, wet wood. So it's getting them. They could be 20 or 30 or 40 years old, and we're getting. And actually, there's more availability. There's been more availability this year and probably next year of good sherry casks, because people are getting out of sherry. I think, you know, the demand for sherry has lessened. So I think people so there's sherry casks that are maybe 20 years old becoming available, which is great for us. So I suppose that's what we started with. And as we went along then, as I said, we're not using any caramel or E150 in our whiskey, so from the colour. So from colour, we're looking from the casks. So we decided that some of the sherry casks were giving us, or some of the VDN casks were giving us lovely sweetness, but not as much colour as we'd like.
Right.
And so we decided to buy some French virgin casks. Okay. Now we could have gone and bought more American virgin casks, but it would be too American dominated. You'd have too much of that creme brulee sweetness and stuff. So
vanilla coming through.
Yeah, vanilla. So we bought some French casks, virgin casks. So if you take it, maybe a new American cask is, I don't know, $220 ex works. A French cask is €800 ex works. So there's a big difference in price. So we're not looking at it in terms of we'll buy this because it's cheaper. We're looking at it in terms of quality and what it can contribute to us. So we're probably at a point now where we do 45% American first fill, 20% virgin, 15% French, 15% VDN. So we've also some rum casks thrown into the VDN mix now, and then 5% French virgin. So the French virgin we leave for about 6 or 9 months, and we empty those then into 5% of American first fills. So it's just to give them that bit of colour and that little bit of spiciness and from the virgin casks.
Okay, so I can get my head around this, because I didn't know this, and this is very interesting. So as far as charred barrels, traditional charred whiskey barrels, as a percentage of your overall wood policy, it's actually a low percentage of the barrels you're using. Most of them are uncharred barrels.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, no, because the American will say 70% of the farm goes into American casks.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So they're charred.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So 30% goes into European oak and 70% goes into American oak. If you say it like that. So the American oak is obviously charred, and we go for charred 3.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right.
Okay. So that's what we do. So that's probably, you know, easier to say like that. 70% goes into charred 3 or into American, be it first fill or virgin, and 30% goes into European oak.
Gotcha. Okay. And you started with single farm.
Yeah.
And some of the, like what I'm tasting now, which is the Ballykincavan.
Ballykincavan.
Yeah. So I'm trying that now, and that is quite different than the Bannow Island. So I understand you're seeing a difference in the whiskey, you know, purely from
just on the Ballykincavan one is slightly different on the single farm releases, because the Ballykincavan was the second farm that we did.
Right.
And we didn't have American virgin casks for that. So there's no American virgin in that one.
Right.
That one is just American first fill, VDN and French. So it's going to be slightly different.
Okay.
I suppose the other thing then with Ballykincavan, it was the second farm we did. So we're kind of, you know, running in the stills and finding our feet a little bit as well. Like, so it's going to be a little bit different. I quite like the Ballykincavan. I think people have kind of pushed the Ballykincavan down the pecking order a little bit. Like for me, the Bannow Island is very fruity and floral. It's very pleasing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, on the nose for Bano. I think you said earlier on marshmallows or something, but there's a fresh rose, and there's a hay, and there's a vanilla custard. It's really inviting. It's really nice. It's really pleasing. Whereas Ballycacavin is a little bit more
Earthy.
Earthy, but I suppose non-traditional in that it's you know, you have to smell Ballycacavin a few times because it doesn't have that really pleasant fruity floral nose. Ballycacavin is more spicy, and it's more
Absolutely.
more spicy, more earthy, more a little bit more complex on the nose, I think.
Looking through your catalogue of releases, they're all bottled at 50%.
Yes, yeah.
So you haven't deviated from that across what I can see.
That's a good question.
Yeah, no, we'll be staying at 50%, Luke. There was a bit of debate, I suppose, at the start. You know, we were going non-chill filtered, so we were going to be above 46%. And there's a bit of debate at the start, I suppose, between financial side and, you know, and the flavours and stuff. Obviously, I suppose the more water you add to it, the more money you might make. But when I looked at putting some whiskies together, 50% sat nicely. It was nice. It was, you know, I kind of said, listen, if people want to add water to it, they can add water to it, but they can't add whiskey to it. Okay, so 50% when we put some bottles together just sat nicely, drank nicely. If you added a drop or two of water, grand, but they're still, you know, around the 50%. So yeah, all our releases will be at 50%. Never say never, I suppose, but you know, we won't be doing at the moment. We won't be doing any cask strength releases, because if we were to do a cask strength release, we'd probably be at about 67% now, because we don't break it down to 63.5% when we cask. We cask at full strength. So if we get runs that are, say, 72%, it goes into the cask at 72%, which is unusual, I suppose, and different to a lot of distilleries as well.
How do you find that from tannin extraction? Is that problematic at all? Have you had any experiences with tannin extraction at 72?
No, not at the moment. Again, it's going back to the casks. Buy good wood. So it sounds simple. It's not simple, but like good barley.
Yeah.
Good processing, brewing, distilling, gets good spirit, good casks.
Yeah, good equals good. Before hang on a second, I lost everyone. Before we go on, I'll show you this, Ned. You'll like this. So this is a bottle. It's a sample from an organisation called the Whisky List in Australia, and this is a distillery called Overeem. So Overeem is one of the great early distilleries in Australia, and this is called Flock Shots. And what this is...
Flock Shots.
Flock Shots. It's called Flock Shots.
Say that after a few shots and see if you can say it.
Flock Shots. From Flock and Hell. So what they do is they collect the flock from different releases. And so, because this is broken down to 43%. I'm
going to plead ignorance here. What's flock?
Flock. So in Australia, what happens, well, this is a term that we use, I think just in Australia perhaps, you let the whiskey settle out. So we don't chill filter in the smaller end of town. So we'll let it sit in a receiver of some shape or form. It might be a plastic IBC or other, and you let it precipitate out. And then you'll decant from there. So you're left with the residue at the bottom, which is really, really concentrated. The analogy I use is it's like the burnt gravy at the end of a gravy pan. It's really concentrated. You scrub it out. So Overeem collect it, and they did a release called Flock Shots, which is just collecting it, and then they bottle it. So it's as cloudy as all fuck. But it's as tasty as. So
it's the flocculation that happens, the sediments.
Correct. Yeah, it's the sediments. I had a question about wood. So the relationship you have with cooperage. I saw a video of you, a number of videos, Ned on tour in the US.
Yeah, there's a bit of a slag here with my passport. So I have a tendency to fuck up the passport part of things. But anyway, we didn't happen this year because it didn't go anywhere.
That looked like one fun trip. But what I found really enjoyable was it was incredibly educational too. Yeah, you showed the whole process and the interaction with the cooperage and you know what it is to put a barrel together.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the thing as well. Like people, you know, when people talk about casks, you know, they just talk about casks. What goes into making a cask? What's, you know, where does the timber come from?
Yeah.
You know, like one of the things we did one on the French one back there a few years ago, and I think you know, a French oak tree could be 200 years old, like, but people, I had a couple of people kind of saying to me that scandalous cutting it down after 200 years, but it's not, because it's part of a managed program. You know, the French government look after, they plant forests, so it's part of a managed program. It's not as if people are going in willy-nilly and cutting them down, like. So, and in America it's different, like. So, you know, I suppose, what's the difference in American and European oak? And one of the big things is in American oak, you can quarter saw a cask.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. What does that mean? So, and you can see, get a circular shape. I suppose my head is nearly a circular shape. Okay. So, if you take a cask, you're not supposed to be laughing, Todd. If you take a cask, you can quarter saw it. So, American one can be quarter sawn, so you can get staves off it. Whereas a European oak has to be split. So you have to look for how to split it. And why do you do that? Because oak is watertight. You know, it holds water, but the way it holds water is you have what's called, I think they're called rain medullas. So you can see the grain of the wood, but running across that, you have the rain medullas that stop the liquid from getting out. So on American oak, it's fairly standard. You can quarter saw and go across, but on European oak, you have to look for it to split it to get it right. And on the European oak, there's a lot more, and it's not waste, because, you know, it's oak. It's going to make furniture and bits and pieces. But say from a tree, you might get maybe say 40 staves for European oak, and an American tree, you might get 200 staves. And that's the difference. That's why American oak is cheaper than European oak. It's just that you get a lot more staves from American oak. But it was interesting because we get to go right back to the start. We went to the forest in America. We went to the forest in France. We went to the cooperages, and to see the difference, like in the two, the way they're made, but the passion in how they're made. Everyone is, you know, really involved in it. In America, it looks to be more industrial. You know, the charn, the heat. Now I can tell you, it was bloody roasting. Like it was probably 24, 4 or 5 or 6 degrees at 10 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, and I'd sweat at the best of times. I'd sweat looking at it. I'd sweat. That's how much I'd sweat.
I saw that on the video. It looked
funny. In America, it was just crazy. But like, you know, you see then staves that are air dried, naturally dried, or dried in kilns, and all the bits and pieces, and you get to see, like, that's where my cask is coming from. So when I say to Kelvin Cooperage or Speyside, you know, this is the casks we're looking for. I can see, you know, this is where it's coming from. It's coming from a stave mill like this. This is the way it's been done. Yeah, happy out, you know. And
nice.
And one of the things then when you go over and you make contact with the people over there, and you have the crack, you know, and you can they see what you're about, what Waterford is about as well. You know, why we're going over and maybe making a film. It's for me to understand more about the timbers, for people to get a little bit of a video, bit of crack, show people, but it's also for the coopers and the distiller and the stave mills to see what we are about. We're looking for these types of casks. What's important to us, You know, it's about a marriage of really, really good spirit and really, really good casks. So we don't want your shit casks. No, not shit is the wrong word. That's not right. But I'm talking about, we don't want recharred casks, and we don't want casks that are third or fourth fill. That's not the cask we're looking for. We're willing to pay good money for good casks.
But you're investing in relationships as well, and that's a big thing here in Australia. Our maltsters, our coopers, we have very good personal relationships, and by having those relationships, it just makes it a lot easier, doesn't it? You know, you can ask questions, you know each other's point of view, you know what you're trying to do, and you're all working to the common direction.
Yeah, and I suppose if we look at craft, you know, what is craft? We're not craft, but we are. So we're not doing things on a small scale. Like we'll lay down probably 6,000 or 7,000 casks every year, right? But we're doing things in a craft way, I suppose, in a bespoke way. Like you're talking about relationships. I said at the start, we don't have contracts with the farmers, but we have excellent relationships with the farmers. You know, they come, obviously they didn't come this year, but they'll come in every year, and we'll have a bit of a party. We'll have the growers gather, we'll have a few pints and a bit of grub and that and chat. But throughout the whole year, like, you know, I'll show you, right? So this is Sheavestown. So that's a bottle of whiskey from Sheavestown, from Philly O'Brien into Kenny. Right? What farmer doesn't want to see where their produce went?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Have their name on a bottle of whiskey that's now being shown in Australia. Okay, same with who's this now? This is Dunbell. This is another Kilkenny farmer. This is in America. So you have a potential for a farmer to have a single farm release. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you know, any farmer in the world who supplies milk, grain, sheep, pigs, whatever it is, that goes into the food chain, and you don't get to see it. You deal with us.
Yeah.
And we're not brewing and distilling on a small scale. We're doing it on a big scale. We're laying down over in around 1,000 LAs every year. As I said, 6,000 or 7,000 casks. So
wow.
we can show Philly O'Brien's fields the day that they were sown, the seeding rate, the fertilizers, the chemicals, when it was harvested, when it was bought into into Dalton's, how it was dried, how long it was stored, when it was malted, how it was brewed, how it was fermented, how it was distilled, what casks it went into, and what your bottle of whiskey, what the breakdown of the casks are. Full traceability, full transparency, back to Philly O'Brien's field.
It's impressive.
And the farmers,
fantastic.
They want to be involved in that. They're our first salespeople. Like you asked earlier on about terroir and getting people involved in that, and it starts with the farmers. Like, you know, farmers don't make a lot of money. Some of them make money and some of them don't and stuff. But you know, most people farm the land because they have a passion for it. They love it.
Yeah.
You know, it's in their blood. It's in their family. And when you see people going out and they're not quite singing to the barley, but they're looking after really well for you because they feel they have a relationship with us. Because they can come in and they can taste their new make spirit. You know, if they're lucky enough to get a single farm release, we'll give them a few bottles. And they can say to their friends and neighbours, this is my whiskey that was sown on the 14th of February 2016 and is a 4-year-old whiskey now, or 3.5-year-old whiskey, and it's on sale in America, or it's on sale in Taiwan, and hopefully on sale in Australia next year. You know what I mean? Like it's just a relationship that you build up, and
right,
they like as well.
There's so many similarities. As I was driving here, I was talking to the maltster that I use. So it's a company called Voyager Craft Malts in Australia. They supply a lot of craft brewers, a lot of craft distillers. And I said, mate, tonight you've got to watch. You know, he knew what was coming tonight, right? And he was dead keen, but it's harvest time. And he says, I'm out harvesting tonight. But he said, I may get the signal, but there's certain fields that I don't get the signal. But if I do, I'm going to be watching. And if I don't watch it, I'll watch it later on. He is a farmer as well. He has built a business and he has farmers where he's buying barley, you know, local farmers. So it all comes from an area called the Riverina in New South Wales. And we can trace it right back to the farms. And people love that. They love the story. They love the fact that it's accessible and it's exciting. So what you're doing is exciting a lot of Australians because a lot of Australians are doing the same. Smaller scale, much smaller scale.
Yeah. And like what I'm saying we're doing, I'm not saying is right or wrong for anyone else. And I would never knock any other distilleries or breweries because, you know, we're doing what we're doing, but, you know, we're passionate about what we're doing. We'll talk about what we're doing. We'll defend what we're doing. And we were, as I said, we were in a fortunate position. We had really good investors. We didn't have to pre-sell bottles or casks or do gins or anything like that. So we could sit and wait. And I suppose that helped build the hype because normally when distilleries bring out whiskies, first, it's source whiskey. It could be a 10-year-old or 20-year-old whiskey, and they need it for income and that. So we were lucky enough. The Pilgrimage, which is the first bottle we released, which is there. You were supposed to come and collect it. Like, you know, obviously COVID fucked that up. But every release, you know, since has kind of been 3.5. I think we've had one maybe or two that was 4 years old, you know, and people are interested in see what the whiskey is like from, because it's our whiskey, it's from the distillery here. It's not sourced right like that. And just going back to the farmers as well, like, you know, I think we've used Gracie probably or Neil probably maybe 92 or 3 different farmers to date. That's about 150 or 60 batches. So what happens is we have some farmers that we've used every year. Some farmers we might have used in 16 and 18 and 20. For different reasons, they come and go. They might meet specification, or they might have done tillage, or they're gone out of it. But we're looking for the best farmers at the price. It's like you know, the Premiership, or, you know, the top AFL teams in Australia. We want those farmers. And when Mark came initially, it was, you know, the southeast of Ireland. But we're actually, this year, 2020's harvest, we have farms from the 4 provinces, which is fairly good because the grain grows best, I suppose, or easiest around the southeast, just because of the we call it the sunny southeast. It's where Ireland gets most with sun and that. And the barley plant likes not sun as such, but it likes light. So in the summer, we could have, you know, it could be bright at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. Now, I know in Australia, your summer days are hot, but they're shorter. You know, so we have the plant is available light, so that's what it likes. So the southeast is where most of the grain is grown. But we have the last few years we've had a guy in Galway, which is in Connacht, and this year we have had a guy up in Donegal, which is the north of Ireland. So, you know, we're going to have grain from the 4 provinces, which is a big thing. And people, actually, farmers have looked to get involved with us through ourselves or through Minchmalt, because they see what's happening. They see, listen, that's really interesting. I get to see where my grain is going. Might have a single farm release, and it's just a project I'd like to be involved in, which is great.
That's awesome. Let's let's see if we've got any questions out there. Todd, we got any questions? Luke, we got any questions or any comments?
No questions so far. Everyone is very intrigued in the conversation.
Yeah, we've had a question come through on Facebook. Hold on.
Yep.
Yep, I'm not on mute. Just thought I'd double check.
Yeah, it's all good.
But I think
you're our IT expert. If you can't get it right, no one can.
I'm on the Brook Ladder. What can I say? Yeah, just I think you've actually asked or answered a lot of the question about how you go about your process for developing multiple whiskies at once, multiple releases, and then choosing which of the farms you're going to have as a release. So I think you've actually answered.
Yeah, I think Ned's pretty well answered that one. Yeah.
Actually, what I might just mention though, Luke and Crafty, is that one of the things that we found out of the terroir project that we're doing is that grain or varieties at the moment have less impact than we thought on flavors.
All right.
And the reason for that is because, grains have been cross-germinated. Okay, so if you were to look at Overture or Irina or Propino or any of the varieties that we've used, if you were to look back the lineage, they have the same parents or grandparents or great-grandparents. So what happened was varieties have been crossbred to get a better variety for us in Ireland in terms of, and it's not in terms of flavors or whatever, it's in terms of, better straw length so that it can withstand resistance to pesticides, or if you have a good yield that the straw will stand up. So that's kind of happened since probably the 50s, I'd say. It started originally around 1900. So what we've done is we're looking at what we call heritage grains. So the first one we did was a variety called Hunter, which was, I think, finished around the mid-1950s. We've done Goldthorpe, which was in around 1900, and we have an old Irish one, which is pre-1900. So really interesting flavors. It's a bit of a pain in the arse though to grow it and harvest it, because obviously there's a reason it was discontinued, so what that involves is going back and getting about 25 grams of grain and spending a few years growing it up. So minch malt do that first. So we're investing in that as well, just to see the different flavors from those grains, and those are really interesting. Obviously the yield is shy. You get maybe 0.8 or a ton to the acre, where you get 3 or 3.5 tons to the acre of convention, So there's a big investment. We're doing a big investment in that, just to see what the flavors are like.
Yeah, right. No, that's very cool.
So a question that's come in from Zoom there. Are there any wild aspects to your yeast strains?
Good question.
No, we the only wild stuff in the distillery are some of the lads that are here, and that's about it, I suppose. But no, we use a standard distilling yeast from Maori yeast. So it's just a distilling yeast. Again, the reason we're using it is because yeast can change flavors and that. So we're just looking for consistency. We were playing with the idea of Diageo left a yeast propagation plant here, so we could propagate our own yeast up, and we're looking at the yeast side of it. But I think the grain, the heritage grains, has kind of taken over as being a bit more interesting, and especially when we kind of discovered from the terroir project, the impact of the grain variety had less of an impact than we thought. So we're kind of focusing on the grain more so than the yeast now. Like, you can use yeast, you can use wild yeast, you can use wine yeast and stuff, but we're not looking at that at the moment. So it's just straightforward distiller's yeast that we're using.
And
Luke.
Being a Irish distillery, I assume you're triple distilled.
No, I should have said
double.
that.
Do your research. Do your research.
That's a good question. I think actually Luke knows this, and he was only prompting me to say it. So thanks, Luke. So Irish whiskey can be doubled or triple distilled, and whiskey can be spelled with or without an E. Now, a lot of people have given out to us that's not the way to spell whiskey, and even the Irish ambassador to America went to pull us up on it there a while ago, and he's actually from Waterford. That's not the way you spell whiskey. So we promptly said, well, yes, it is. You can spell it with or without an E. So we double distill. Why do we double distill? I suppose we had 2 stills available. Was probably part of it. So the 2 stills were built in 1972 for Inverleven Distillery, and worked on and off for about 19 years. So when Mark was in Brookladdy and getting it back up and running, a guy called Demolition Dave told him that he was knocking an Inverleven Distillery, and you're looking for stuff. So if you go, I'll sell you whatever bits and pieces you want. It'll save me, get rid of it. So they loaded up a barge and bits and pieces, and off they went. And they found 2 stills, actually 3 stills in Inverleven. And Crafty, as a Brookladdy fan, you'll be aware of the still that was outside the distillery there with the wellies hanging out.
And that's the one that's it? That's the one you got?
That's our wash still. Okay. The other still the spirit still was in a shed that Mark had. Now, I'd like to see the size of the shed because it's a big enough.
Yeah,
still.
I reckon.
And the third still was Ugly Betty, which is the botanist. So that's how those stills became available. So when Mark left Brookladdy, he bought the 2 stills with him, and Forsyths renovated at the time. Forsyths were building the stills for Macallan, so there was a 3-year waiting list. So Mark likes the style of the double distillation, and for me, I suppose I'd mentioned before is how you actually distill. Rather than double and triple distilling as well, because I can double distill, you can double distill, Todd can double distill, Luke can double distill. We can all go into the same distillery one week after another and distill differently. Okay.
Yep.
So it's heavy distill. So the double distillation for us works just with the light, elegant, fruity, floral style that we're looking for. We're not looking to get to the higher ABV. We get the flavors we want by double distilling. So you can double or triple distill, and we spell the whiskey without an E. I suppose there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that you can, and we're a little bit different, I suppose. And the other one, I suppose there's been a lot of debate about this and chat about this recently, in that it was kind of seen that it was nearly brought in as a marketing term, bring in the E to differentiate between Scottish and Irish, like a little bit. But I think there's probably a lot more history to Ireland having the E and not having the E than that, but that's kind of what's been talked about recently. And the other thing is, I suppose, the play on the fact that we don't use E150, which is caramel. We're dropping the E. Also. And I suppose it's another thing, like Luke mentioned, that we're an Irish whiskey, and we are, but we're not kind of playing on the Irish whiskey thing, because I suppose this is coming back to some of the things Mark has been talking about, and we're interested in as well. We only use Irish barley, and I suppose for anyone out there that doesn't know, you can make Irish whiskey without using any Irish grain.
Yeah, right.
So we have a thing called GI, geographical indicator. So like champagne is GI'd, and I'm sure there's stuff in Australia that's GI, probably Foster's, is it? No.
Foster's is coming back to Australia, apparently.
That's a stereotypical one.
We're trying to get rid of it.
I usually slag off the Australians and the New Zealanders by saying that your best rugby player ever was probably Dan Carter.
Right. Don't know.
And then you hear
Dan
people going,
Carter, you know Dan Carter.
Oh, Dan Carter. Oh,
yeah, or Richie McCaw. And then you'll have some. I played a bit of rugby with a few New Zealand and Australian lads, and just to put them up, you know, I say to the Aussie lads, "Geez, Richie McCaw's your best player," and he'd say, "I'm from fucking Australia." Winding them up, like, you know.
That was a great accent, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Was it? Yeah. Give me another few minutes, and I'll
Hey, I gotta ask the question. What's with the blue bottle? And now I love the blue bottle. When I first saw the blue bottle, I thought that really stands out. That is so different. It's so elegant, and I love the different color schemes on the bottle. Where did it come from? What's that all about?
So I suppose going back to the when I mentioned there a minute ago about E150 and the color of whiskey. So we're going for a natural color, like.
Yeah.
We're not looking for consistency. I suppose that's one thing in our whiskies, that we're not looking for a consistency on every bottle. We're looking just to promote what the farm is telling us and the flavors the farm gives us. So by having a blue bottle, you can't see the color of whiskey. So if you have someone in a pub or in a shop and they go, I think I'll buy that one because it looks old, or it looks, you know, they're not maybe necessarily going to get what we're about. So Mark didn't want people buying the whiskey and the colour of it. So the blue bottle disguises the colour of it. I suppose blue is a Waterford colour. So the Waterford colours in Waterford are blue and white. And I should mention at this stage, if anyone is on from internationally or Ireland or ever, that Waterford are actually in the Hurling All Ireland this weekend, which is a big thing. It's probably like it's like the grand final in the AFL probably, or something like that.
Okay, take your word for that one.
Yeah, Waterford are in the final, and it's normally on in the start of September, end of August, but with COVID it's been pushed back. So they're in the All Ireland this year against Limerick, and so we should give them a shout. Even though I'm a Kilkenny man, I'd still wish Waterford all the best. So that's on this weekend. So it's a nod to Waterford as well. A blue colour is that, but primarily it's to not show the colour of whiskey.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Well done.
Yeah.
Now with the you go, Todd.
Crafty, there's another question from Zoom. It's
Oh, yep. Okay, go.
to Ned. Does Waterford use unmalted and malted barleys?
No, 100% single malt. So all malted barley. And I suppose the other thing is, when I talk about single farms, the plan is to do a cuvee, which is a mixture of farms. And sometimes I might say it's a blend of farms, but it's still single malt because we're a single malt distillery. So I think some people think when they hear a blend of farms, they might think of a blended whiskey, which is a different category altogether. So
yeah,
only single malt. But actually, I was just saying there earlier on about the GI and the geographical indicator, and the grains that. So you don't have to use Irish grains, but we use Irish grains. So we would like, you know, a separate or subcategory to say, you know, this is only Irish produce in terms of the grains, like, you know what I mean? So that's not there at the moment because obviously there's probably not enough grain to keep every distillery going, which is fine. But I think people would like to know, you know, this is only Irish grain, or this is 80% Irish grain or 50% Irish grain and stuff, like. So there's a bit of that so as well. So if we have a bad harvest, or the farmers have a bad harvest, which has happened over the years, you know, we're going to get less spirit yield, and we're going to get obviously different flavors. But if the Irish harvest was to collapse altogether, unfortunately we wouldn't have grain.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
I got a question about the Waterford. The Waterford flavour. So a new distillery breaks onto the scene, and the expectation is a distillery will have a certain flavour profile, right? you've gone a different line with you're releasing lots of individual releases, farm releases, and blends of farms. So is there now, or will there be in the future, a standard Waterford release, which will be, you'll pick it up and go, yeah, that's a Waterford. I know that's a Waterford. Can you see those days coming, or will you continue with the way you're going?
No one, yes. No one, yes. I tell you why, no one, yes, because, and I suppose this is the one, this is my first whiskey job. So these are the first whiskeys I've ever made. Okay, so I put
they're your baby. These are your babies. These ones.
Yeah. So when I was looking at putting the whiskies together originally, I suppose I thought, Mark would be involved and we'd have a chat and a discussion, and I was asked. So I remember one day I said, he was over, and I said, what style of whiskey are you looking for? What are you looking for? And I remember it ended up in a row, and he cursing and yelling and fucking me out of it, right? Basically. And he was kind of saying, and and this is what it is, we're not looking for a specific style of flavor. It's what each farm has given us, okay?
Right.
But as I've mentioned a few times, we have a distillery style of spirit, which is that light, elegant, fruity, floral spirit. That's probably a water DNA because of the way we distills and the way we ferment, really long fermentations. Like we have 120-hour plus fermentations. So we're looking for secondary fermentation, malolactic, to promote that floriness in the wash.
Yep.
So after that conversation, I said, right, I know what he's on about now. We're not looking for uniformity. We have a distillery style spirit that we know we have, and the flavors come from the farm. So from the single farms, what I'm trying to do with that is get a balance of maybe the casks that's interesting and that does justice to the flavors.
Yep.
And then when we're getting to the cuvee, it's to build layers of complexity and do it in such a way that there's a balance to it, that we don't have a dominance of one flavor over another, but each layer is like a millefeuille, or like a cake, a layer cake. So every mouthful is nearly different, or you go back after 10 minutes of opening it and there's a different smell, or there's a different flavor, because barley is probably, I think, is one of the most complex plants flavor-wise in the world. Like the brain can't process all the flavors and all the tastes. Like that's why you don't see probably alcoholics drinking whiskey, or they drink vodka, because vodka is just alcohol. There's no flavor from it, such like. But whiskey has so many flavors and noses off it that you go back to it 20 minutes after opening, and it's different. You add a drop of water, and it opens up a different aspect of the whiskey. So we're not looking for a consistency. We're looking to promote best what the farmer's telling us. And with the cuvées, then it's to give you a mindfuck of a whiskey.
Yeah, mindfuck of whiskey. I love it.
Mindfuck of whiskey. And like what we've said, Mark has said this before, we're looking to make the most profound whiskey in the world. We're not saying we're making the best
on the bottle. Will mindfuck go on the bottle?
It could do, yeah. It's been said a few times already. So maybe you might go on the bottles for Australia because you're more liberal. Some of the other countries.
Oh yeah, it's sold big here.
It's sold. We guarantee it.
Some of the other countries might give us a slap in the wrist for that one, but
no, not in Australia. No.
Not in Australia, no.
We'll just take their share.
Yeah.
They'll go for it.
We're going to shoot the shit with Crafty and give you a mindfuck of a whiskey.
Yeah. A private release. It'll sell.
But right. So we're not going to have consistency as such, but I suppose the style is the distillery style of spirit, and the flavors then vary from farm to farm. And then with the cuvées, it's to put them together in an interesting way, in a mindfuckery of a kind of way.
Yeah, no, it's cool. That's very, very cool. Now, I just want to talk about beer. So This is a good mate of mine. He's an Irishman. He's a happy Irishman, and he's got a brewery called Hop and Clover. He's a gypsy brewer. And so this is actually an Irish red ale, which I'm really enjoying. Got quite a smoky note. Dave is his name, Davey boy. And
Where's he from?
Don't quote me, but I think he's from Derry, isn't he, Todd? Rings a bell?
That sounds right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Derry. He and I and Todd, we talk a lot. And so we're doing beer.
Well, actually, when we say talk a lot, Dave talks a lot.
Dave talks a lot.
We
and we don't talk a lot? You're kidding.
I thought you were going to say talks a lot of shit, but anyway.
There's a lot of shit.
An Irishman has to say that.
But one of the things that we talk about, and we've done projects. So I'll give you an example. I had in the part of the independent bottling range, I had an ex-Lagavulin whiskey cask that came to Australia, picked up by a winemaker who made a muscat wine. I picked it up via a cooperage who turned it back into a whiskey cask. I made a whiskey. I gave it to Davey Boy, and he made a choc cherry stout. And then the plan is I get it back. So it's sort of layer up and layers of flavors, and it's quite exciting. Yeah. So the question I got for you is, the Irish like a beer every now and then. So you've got access to a lot of beers, and beer casking over there, I imagine, would be a thing.
Yeah.
Do you have any projects like that, exploring the beer route, or do you have an interest in that sort of approach?
Not at the minute, I suppose. There's a good few local craft breweries and stuff, bits and pieces. So there would be opportunities to do stuff like that. But not at the minute, because I suppose, as you can appreciate, there's so many variations we can do with the farms from the whiskey point of view at the moment, that we're just, we're literally still only finding our feet. Like, this is the first year of our release. It'd be nice maybe to have a look down the line and do something with the beer and bits and pieces, but nothing in the pipeline at the moment. But yeah, no, it'd be nice just to do a bit of work later on. But it'll probably be a few years before we start looking at that. Like, I mean,
down the track.
There's a guy, actually, the Ballycliffe that you have there. The farmer is David Welch Chemist, is his name, and he actually has his own craft brewery called Ballycliffe. And so, we've sent, I think we've given him a couple of whiskey casks from to age a bit of stuff in. And actually, you're talking about red ales. He has a red ale that I really, really like as well. So yeah, there'll be opportunities down the line, but not for the time being, I'd say.
Not at this stage. All right. Now let's bring the cone of silence down. So Ned, it's just you and me. There's no one else in the room. No one's listening. So what secret projects have you got going on at Waterford?
We have no secret projects going on at Waterford. I suppose we're concentrating on I suppose the tower project is the main project. So that's a scientific one. We're looking at doing some farm stuff. Obviously the heritage grains are a big one as well. But like, I don't know, what were you thinking? Ask me a question and see if you can answer it.
No, I'm just curious to see what else is out there. Are you looking at internationally? Are you looking at projects? Are you looking at certain wine finishes and taking them certain directions? Because there is a real strong wine influence with the Mark Rainier background, isn't there?
So we don't have to, when you say finishes, we don't have to look at finishes, because the spirit starts in a cask.
Yeah.
So it's in an Oloroso or a Porto cask or a Chateau Lafite cask from day one. So it's not finished to start there. But I suppose one of the things I'd like to do, or we're looking at, is maybe doing a rosé whiskey. Oh,
there's a distillery in Australia called Hobart Distillery, and they did a release in a rosé cask. Very, very interesting. Remember it, Todd? The rosé cask? Hobart Distillery?
I suppose we're not going to use kind of a rosé cask as such. It'll be wine casks with some VDN, and maybe There might be a little bit of American first fill, maybe not. So it's just to get that color pink, because a good few of our casks, the whiskey is coming out pink. So I don't know. Should I have said that on it was only you and me anyway, as you said.
Yeah, it's okay. The cone of silence is coming up now. So
if I shouldn't have said that, Mark Newton is going to email me or ring me. But we're hopeful to do that, and it kind of goes back to the cheese. You know, I'd like a bit of cheesiness, like, you know, 80s music and all that, like, and it also ties into the brewery's first recorded date is the 14th of February 1792, which is Valentine's Day, like, you know. So we won't have it out for Valentine's Day next year, because we're just snowed under, but hopefully we'll have something out maybe next year on that. So that's one of the things. Ask me another question. I won't tell you, Anne, but you can ask me.
All right, where do you think Waterford's now on the world stage? There's a lot of excitement.
It's not in Australia,
but it's not in Australia. Yes. So hang on, we've got a special announcement about Australia, and it's straight off the press from Ned. Yeah. We are going to have potentially Waterford in Australia when, Ned?
Yeah, hopefully early next year. There's a good bit of work going involved, and obviously COVID has made a mess of a lot of stuff, and you're obviously in state lockdowns and the whole lot, so it's probably making it a bit harder. But just discussing it this morning there, I was asking Mark Newton, and we're hopeful to have it maybe early next year, because there's been a huge amount of interest from Australia, which is great. It'd be great to get it over. There's obviously a lot of Irish people over there, and there's anyone there from Ireland that knows me, hello. Brother-in-law Nick and Michelle and the kids, Anna and Maya, Colin O'Neill in the Doss House bar in Sydney there.
Doss House, coming to talk to you soon.
Yeah. So so there's a lot of interest, and we're trying to get into it, because what's great is, you know, even if a shop is looking for it, we've got some obscure places looking for it. I'm nearly sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I think recently a shop in something like Mongolia looked for it. Something like that, something mad. But the fact that they're looking for it, they're obviously interested in it. So if they're going to sell it, they'll know the story. Because I suppose the other thing is, we are different. You know, someone may not, as I said, someone may not care about provenance and traceability and terroir, but the people who are looking for it are interested in it, and will talk about it, and, you know, will give the right information, because terroir is going to be used differently. Like, terroir is not a sense of place. It's not, you know, Waterford Distillery is the terroir. That's not, for us, that's not the terroir. No. The terroir is, you know, what influences where the barley was grown, and, you know, climate and topography and all the bits and pieces that influence that. That for us is terroir. It's not a sense of place of the distillery, or, you know, obviously people are important and have an input in, you know, in the making of it, but that's still not terroir for us. You know?
No, so, it's where the barley's growing.
Yeah.
It's location and environmental influence. Yeah.
The flavors of that. So hopefully early next year we'll have it in Australia.
Okay, cool. Change the subject again, because I'm just sort of thinking on my feet, shooting the shit as we go along. Yeah. Globally, what's happening with whiskey? What excites you right now besides Waterford?
What other distilleries are
not necessarily distilleries, but if you want to name a distillery that excites you, that's fine. But more trends, regions, and distilleries. Yeah.
I suppose for us, starting off, we were looking at. We have distributors, and they were working with shops like our Lemaze and the Whiskey, or the Whiskey Exchange, and you know, and they were saying to us, listen, this stock will last us, you know, 6 months or, you know, a good few months, and then we'll come back to you. And like they sold out in 3 hours. Never saw it before. Okay. So from my point of view, it's where has Waterford whiskey gone? That's surprising.
Right.
Or that, you know, so our very first orders came in from Taiwan. Very first order of Waterford whiskey went to Taiwan. So I'm just interested to see, you know, what the Taiwanese will think of Waterford whiskey. The different styles. Like I was on a call there last week with a guy from China, and we're doing a small release for him for China, but it's just to understand the Chinese palates a bit. You know,
Yeah. Okay.
us as me as a meat eating, spud eating, beer drinking, hardy kind of rugby playing, thick fella, you know, I have different flavor profiles and different palates than to someone in China. So it's to understand the difference in palates for different places, and what necessarily I might think is nice, they might not, or they'll pick up different flavors. Like I was talking to a guy, again, who was involved in the Terroir project, Dr. Kieran Kokali from Chagas, and he did some work with milk going to China, and their flavors, their profiles, what they can pick up, and it doesn't even register on our scale. So that for me, from my point of view, is going to be interesting to see different territories. What I have a taste note, you won't taste. You'll taste something totally different, which is grand anyway, because everyone is different. But in some are totally different altogether, where they have totally different foodstuffs and flavor profiles, you know,
And experiences.
will they get? So when I talk about a barnyard note, I did a bit of farming, and I love getting your hands dirty and bits and pieces, and I really like that note. But does another territory find that offensive? So do I have to pay her that back if I want to go and send whiskey there? Or do I just send it off to them and say, well, fuck you, this is what you're getting, like, you know? And that's kind of what I'm kind of looking forward to. And also going to the different countries and experiencing them and seeing, you know, because pressing the flesh and meeting people, like we were talking about the casks earlier on, getting an understanding of what they're doing and what we're doing. I think that's what I'm kind of looking forward to in whenever we do get out and that. What's exciting, I suppose, is trying to get into the markets that are not even big markets, but are who maybe don't understand terroir or don't understand traceability, or who want to know about traceability. We can tell them, this is our traceability, and we can blow your socks off. You can put we have terroir codes on the back of the bottles. So I don't know if people can see the terroir code there. So, okay.
Not really. Yep, carry on. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a terroir code on the back of each bottle, and you go into our website and you put in that terroir code, and that gives you information. That gives you the sound of the farm. We've gone out and recorded sounds of the farm. We can show you the soil, we can show you the fermentation times, we can show you the casks, we can show you the cask information. And it's to get people interested in that. And it's probably to, I think when we do have the terroir project come out, I think it's going to open a discussion that some people won't like. Some people will try and come back at us after, maybe not in a nice way or whatever, but like, we're up for the chat. Like, we're willing to talk about what we're doing and kind of defend it to, you know, because this is what we believe. We'll have a chat about it. And if you have a different point of view, well, that's grand. Let's have a chat about it.
Yeah.
You know, or you can show us what the information, or you can. So I think the terroir project is probably going to blow things up in the whiskey world a little bit.
I honestly can't wait, because the disruptor element, I think, is a great thing. I think it encourages new conversations. It takes people different ways.
I just say on that though, I don't think it's a disruptor element. I think it's Mark who has a belief and a passion, going whole hog for it, and putting money behind it and doing things to the nth degree. I think that's it. Rather than being a disruptive thing, it's been, this is what I believe in, this is the vision I have, and we're in. It's like going in with in a game of poker with your best hand, and
you're all in. Well, so let me add to what I was just saying though. Disruptor element, but basically coming forward and presenting empirical data and saying, we have done the hard yards. Here is the data. This is what we believe. We're going in this direction, and sharing it and being transparent. And that's the cool thing. The level of transparency, that will excite people. That will encourage people to go off and explore and challenge their own thought processes. And some will agree and some won't agree. And that's just the nature of the beast, isn't it?
We're going to have people that don't like our whiskey, and that's just the nature of that. That's what will happen. And
yeah,
so it's like, you know, we're not going to say, well, you have to like it because we've spent X amount on this or that. People are not going to like it, and that's fair enough. Like, I mean, we're not going to fall over.
Where should we start? So for all of us Australians who we haven't had our little sampler of Waterford, we're not getting a circle.
Thanks, Joe. Joe, thank you.
Where do we start? What do you recommend we start with? This was actually a question off of Zoom from Ken Moore. Where do you recommend we start with the Waterford releases?
Wherever you can get your bottle, whatever bottle you can get.
Yeah. I'd say that'd be the case.
Yeah, like, to be honest with you, I'm not going to say get Sheavestown or get Ballymorgan or get Ballykilcavan. I'd say if you can get your hands on a bottle, like, just get that bottle and enjoy it for what it is, or explore for what it is, and then the next bottle you get, you can do the same. And you know, one of the cool things about it too is what you can do is when you get a Sheavestown and a Ballymorgan or a Broomsland or Ballykilcavan or whatever, you can mix them together. You can make your own cuvee.
Oh, steady on. You're going to excite a few more people now. You've done it now.
This is, I don't know what I have here. This is Banno Island. That's Banno Island, and I think this is Sheavestown. Look. And you can just say, right?
It's a good day for Ned today. You can see.
But like, you're making your own whiskey then.
Yeah.
And if the three, or if Luke and Todd and Crafty are together, and you have the same whiskies, you can just put in different measures, and you get different whiskey. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then you can smell it, and you can go, okay, I can get the that rose, hay, red apple, candy floss, and now I can get something else, and it's a mixture of the two farms. So I'd say get whatever you can get your hands on, just start there. There's no bottle that's a starter. Each farm is an individual farm. It's from that farm. It's a flavor of that farm. And whatever you can get your hands on, and then if you can get something else, try that and explore for what it is. And then you can start by, you can put little bits together and go, I like that. Or,
that implies that there will be any left once you've opened the bottle.
well, that is the thing, yeah. But I suppose, you know, what is whiskey? Whiskey is for drinking with mates.
Yeah. Conversation. Conversation, have a crack. Now, just on that, Ned, so it sounds like you're going to be traveling once things open up, and hopefully you're going to be traveling to Australia. So when you come to Australia, you're going to run a masterclass, and you're going to do a blending of Waterford within the masterclass with people. That would just be an awesome experience, my friend. Yeah. It really would.
What we had, one of the things we were due to do was we're due to go to Canada there this year.
Right.
And for me, if I'm doing a tasting, like the Zooms have been great, but I much prefer face-to-face.
In the room, yeah.
In the room, yeah. And like, to be honest with you, if I was doing a masterclass, or the few I've done, I'm not talking to people, I'm talking with people, we're having to chat.
Yep.
And one of the things I'd love to do is to do, okay, we do a tasting of maybe a couple of new makes, and because that's where you get to see the terroir influence before the cask is involved, okay?
Mm.
So you do a couple of new makes, we maybe do 4 whiskies, and then we have an empty glass. And from those 4 whiskies, you make your own whiskey.
Yeah.
Okay? And if there's 40 people in the room, I guarantee you'll have 40 different whiskies.
Yeah.
That would be an amazing pack to get.
Yeah. It's to make your own.
All your different new makes.
Yeah.
Just to see, so we can see what the effect is of the individual farms, and experience that firsthand. That'd be magic.
What I'd be saying is, if we're in a room with 40 people, 4 whiskies, you put the whiskey together whatever way you want, there's going to be there'll be 40 different whiskies, and it's to talk about the smell or the difference, or I put this amount in and I put this amount in because I like that note, but that note is actually lost now. See, a big part of putting whiskey together is, especially for the cuvées, is what you might think will work might necessarily work.
Yeah.
Because when you bring farms together and flavors together, notes get lost or other notes are amplified. It's like having a relationship, but there's different stages that different things work, and you think these two will work together, they work for a little while and then they don't, or there's ones then that just go hand in glove straight away and they work for a lifetime. And it's the same with whiskies like that. When you're putting whiskey together, you think, okay, so this one on its own is, oh yeah, that's really nice. Oh, that's lovely. I think the two of them will work well together, and they don't.
No.
They might hit off each other, and in some aspects that can be a good thing. But others, then you don't have a balance, or one is too domineering. So that's the interesting part as well, because we had back in February we had distributors over from Europe and that, and we had a few beers and a bit of food, and we came back to the distillery. It was late in the evening, and we went back to the tasting room, and we were doing a few bits and pieces, and I said, listen, you put the whiskey together the way you want. So there was a heap of samples there, and I think there was about 4 or 5 of them did it, and not one of them was balanced, because it's not, so I understand the spirit, I understand our whiskey, my whiskey, and I know, listen, it's like making a cheesecake. Okay, this is going to be the base layer, and this is going to be the ingredients, and I can put a little bit of this in and a little bit of this in, and that's where understanding what they're distilling and what's going into the casks and the cask influence comes into them when they're putting the whiskey together. It's not just as easy as throwing it all in together, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and when you're expecting flavors and noses to come off it, they mightn't. One of the things I'd say about our whiskey too is the nose and the taste don't match very often. So when I'm smelling this, I'm smelling freshness, I'm smelling floralness, I'm smelling a little bit of, it smells old. And when I taste it, then it has that youthfulness. It has a spiciness to it that not necessarily getting in the nose sometimes. So
a disconnect, which could be good.
So, our whiskey doesn't have, the nose doesn't always come through on the taste, and vice versa. So it's that's where the complexity is starting to come in as well.
It's very cool. It's very cool, because I've been distilling for 3 years, laying barrels for 5.5 years, and in the last, Todd, how long? Last 2.5 years, we've been vatting barrels and learning the concept of vatting barrels. And if I think about one particular example, we were playing around. So this is just a single I don't know, it was about 400 bottles, right? And we were playing around with different barrels. And we had the two components, the two barrels, and they were different barrels. And we thought, we know that, we like that. We know that, we like that. If we put the two together, we'll like it. And we didn't like it.
Yeah.
It didn't like it. It clashed. And what we ended up doing was putting, so this is 200 odd litres. We ended up putting, it was like 10 litres of another barrel, which was a botrytis wine barrel finish, just 10 litres. And it just, it just brought the whole thing together. And it was such a revelation. And we've done it a number of times. And just recently, I did a project with a good friend of mine, Marty Pye, who may be watching, Waterford Distillery. And I was at Marty's distillery, and we're really small, as you know, and said, Marty, give me 20 litres of your whiskey, and I will vat it with 20 litres of my whiskey, and we'll play around and we'll come up with a blend, and it'll be a vatted release, which we actually call Vatman. So what happened is I was going 1-to-1. So Marty's whiskey, which is light and floral, my whiskey, which is quite heavy, chocolatey, robust. And I was going 1-to-1 ratio. I was going, no, it needs more Craftworks. No, it needs more Riverborn. And I was doing this. And I couldn't get the balance right. And then I had a couple of litres of Marty's from a previous project, which was a peated whiskey. And it was Scottish peat, 100%. And it was a very peated whiskey, but it wasn't medicinal. It was malty, biscuity, but had smoke to it. And just a small amount, just up the middle, just brought the two components together and gave it structure. And this is a massive learning just in the last 2 years, and it's super exciting, the whole concept of vatting and blending.
Yeah, and you know, that's so I'd have bottles like this, small bottles like this that I get in from Ballygarn, and what I do then is, you know, it's not just, you know yourself, it's not just a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You actually have to measure, you know, you have to measure out the volumes, and you have to say, right, I'm going to use 20 mils of this, and I'm going to use 20 mils of that, and I'm going to use 20 mils of something else, and 10 mils, and then you go, okay, that doesn't quite work. Then you have to go back again. So each bottling, you know, takes a bit of time and takes a bit of, you know, but it's going back to kind of, you know, understanding your whiskey and understanding your spirit and going, okay, this should be a good starting point. And then it's just the finessing points. It's what brings you over the top to get you that interest in flavors, or where they're working together, or as you said, where you can introduce something. So, you know, if I'm doing a cuvee, which is a mixture of farms, you know, I'd say, I remember this spirit and whiskey, and that might be the component that's missing, or I can add in a French cask to this now, and that'll change it to where I need it to go. You know, so it is that. It's not just as simple as throwing it all in together. No,
it's cooking. It's basically cooking, isn't it? Knowing your ingredients and how they all work together.
And that's it. Like, so each cask is an ingredient. And so we have 30,000 casks filled at the moment.
Right.
So
yeah.
Each cask is an ingredient.
Crafty, just pan to the left and show Ned our barrels. Just to put things into perspective. This is our entire range at the moment.
It's not about quantity.
Oh, no, it's all about quality.
It's quality. Carry on, Ned.
Hey, Todd, it's not about the size of it, it's how you use it.
Yeah, exactly right. We're very careful how we use it.
It's knowing how to use it. It's knowing how to use it. So I suppose that kind of ties back to a couple of things, in that we're not looking for a specific style. As I said, the spirit and the way we lay down the spirit, that gives us our Waterford style, and then it's just what the farm gives us and trying to bring it together. And actually, just when you were mentioning the peat there a minute ago, I was just curious to, you know, and you were talking about your spirit is heavier. Do you have lower cut points? Where, like, your cut points, you know,
Quite-
when you're going to tails, are they lower than the other? What was the other distillery? Sorry,
So Riverbourne, generally about 72 first cut point, second cut point, around about 62.
Okay.
I'm sort of 75 and I'll go down to 60.
Okay.
And the reason I go so deep is because I've got some roasted malts in there, and those roasted malts around the 60 mark. The richness comes through. You can go to wet cardboard very, very quickly. It's a very fine line. You got to watch it. But
it's quite interesting.
Then we probably don't go below 65 and a half.
Yeah.
We'll start about 75 and go to about 65 and a half, 66. So we have a really tight middle cut. But our spirit then is a lighter spirit.
Yes.
So,
So
that just, give the audience, like you can go anywhere you want with cut points, but one of the important things though is at the very start is what we found is that if you miss, the 4 shots of spirit, if you're not careful with that, you miss mouthfeel. The mouthfeel at the start. And if you go too deep into the spirit and don't collect that as spirit, you're going to miss that mouthfeel. So you were mentioning oiliness and stuff earlier on.
Yeah.
That's kind of where that's coming from as well. So like our distillery is all singing, all dancing in terms of automation. There's one thing that's not automated is the safe, where there's manual cuts on, and the steam is semi-automated. So it will bring steam on a program to a certain point, and then the distiller adjusts for flow. So you can see with different cut points. I was just curious when you were talking about the peat as well. With peat as well, like if you're cutting at a high on peat, I'd imagine, or low on peat, that gives you that, when you were talking about medicinal point aspect of the peat, that peat could have been cut at a higher point, than maybe in the low 60s.
Right.
So you can imagine you could have a peat that's a light, elegant peat. Like our spirit, if we were to do peat, it would be a light, elegant, maybe. Whereas if you're cutting at 60 or 61, you can imagine that heaviness, that slight faintness, that slight cardboard could come into it. And
Absolutely.
sometimes I think when people are talking about peat, they're mistaking peat for the lower cut points, I think.
Yeah. No. I totally get what you're saying there. I mean, as you're getting further down, closer to the 60s, they're heavier, meaty flavors. But it's such a fine line.
Yeah, that maybe lends themselves to the peat style that some distilleries or people are looking for,
Yeah.
But just to let you guys know, it's 9 o'clock, so that's 2 hours.
Oh, okay. Yeah. How are we going? Have we got any questions out there, or are we just shooting shit amongst ourselves?
No, it's all good so far from Zoom's point of view.
We're answering all the questions just in conversation, yeah?
I presume there are people watching, is there?
Oh, no, there's people watching. Don't worry about that.
Watching, and they're obviously enjoying what you're saying, so.
Okay. Yeah, well, I suppose, we're after 2 hours. It's 10 o'clock now. It's starting to get bright outside now.
Yeah. So we probably should let you go, Ned. We probably should let you get back to your day job, I guess.
Yeah, well, breakfast is the next thing, because Army doesn't march on an empty stomach, and I'm an army on my own, so. Sure. Is that anything else you want to cover? Or, I suppose what I'd say too is, hopefully next year when we get back up and running, is if anyone is coming over, bang us off an email to info@Waterford Distillery or info@Waterford Whiskey now. That's without .com. That's the new address. We're gone to Waterford Whiskey, and we'll try and arrange something. So hopefully when this COVID is over and you're back up moving, it's probably going to be the summer anyway, I'd say, for us, or winter for you. To be great to see people coming over and sharing their time.
You will have a lot of Australians coming your way when they can. I can guarantee that. There is a lot of people that love to travel, love to experience whiskey, and when when the borders open, and Ned, you can come down, mate. I'll shout you a red ale. Shout you a red ale, and we will have some fun in Australia, and we cannot wait till Waterford is in Australia. And I speak for a lot of people this, and also thank you, mate. Thank you to having the chat tonight, shooting the shit. It's been really informative. I've learned a lot. Others have, and just shooting the shit is fun. Yeah, no. In fairness, I think if we can get to Australia, it's definitely on my list anyway. I've been to Perth before. Wouldn't mind going to Sydney and around that area, or whatever part of Australia it'll have me. Could get deported like years ago from so wherever we're for crimes against whiskey, maybe some people might say. Have
to go pretty hard.
No, it'd be great to get over. And I think shooting the shit is kind of suits our style as well. Like we like having the crack and just taking it handy, and just hopefully when we get the care package from Australia, we'll give you a shout again. We'll have a little chat about it and stuff.
Oh, mate, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Love to do it.
We're really looking forward to your opinion on it, Ned.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, listen, we'll drink it anyway. Once it's alcoholic anyway, that'd be a good start. Anyway. I'm sure. Just listen to and having the chat with you there the last little while and yesterday and that, and seeing what they're doing. It's right up my alley as well. Like, and the fact that you're having an ale there as well is a good sign as well. And hopefully someday soon we'll get over and we get to have a chat face to face.
Awesome, mate. All right. Well, you have a good day. Keep doing what you're doing, and we look forward to hearing more from Waterford, mate.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Luke, Todd, and Crafty. Stay safe and happy Christmas. Actually, one second now.
You got an Irish Santa there? Yeah. You got an Irish Santa.
The cheeks are genuine. It's not makeup. The conditioning, as if COVID had to hit and Santi wasn't available this year, I was I think being penciled in to do the Irish section. So whether people, the kids know I'm Santi's cousin anyway, so have to All right.
All right, very good, my friend.
The comments of is everyone is very appreciative of your time, and they've thoroughly enjoyed your conversation. So.
And yes, I am single. If anyone is asking.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
There were a lot of those. We didn't think it was appropriate though.
And congratulations on winning the Tri Nations this year. Congratulations, lads.
Even I know that.
Actually, when are the Lions going to Australia?
I don't know. Todd, that's your camp.
It's been a while since they've been. It was a couple of years ago they toured Australia and New Zealand. So
maybe the next time the Lions are in Australia, we might make it out there as well.
Yeah.
The bar, there you go.
All right.
All right, my friend.
We'll forget the palms. Though.
Oh, yeah. Ireland does it to us.
Yeah.
Sláinte. See you, my friend.
Bye. Take this off now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. And tune in for the next one. We will continue this probably till 2022 with the content that we've got, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's good. We might even invite Ned back.
All right, we off, Luke?
We are almost.